Uhuru comrades, and welcome to today's Omali Tommy Sunday Study featuring Chairman Omali Yeshitela. My name is Akilia Nai, the Director of Agitation and Propaganda for the African People's Socialist Party, as well as your MC for this morning. Make sure to hit that like button and share this video on the platform that you're tuning in from. This week, Chairman Omali Yeshitela will continue reading from the pamphlet, Smash, Slander, Build Principled Unity, a criticism of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, which was first published in 1977 in the Burning Spear newspaper and 1979 in pamphlet form. We'll start at part 2 on page 12. You can access the study materials in the description. For the first hour, the chairman will review the study materials, and in the second hour, we'll open it up to you, our live viewers, to ask your questions. It's my honor now to introduce our leadership, the leader of the African nation and the worldwide African revolution, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru, Chairman.
Okay, Uhuru. Yeah, just struggling with the device here. Thank you so much, Comrade Akile, for the introduction. I'd like to express appreciation to all of you who've come to the study on this morning. This is an important study. It has been for a while, and we've been going through a period of discussions over the last several weeks in particular that I think should be helpful in demonstrating the process of party building. And I think it would be important not to just hear this as a simple criticism of the All African People's Revolutionary Party that we're talking about, but as a kind of expose on how the process of building the party has moved over a period of time, and certainly during the early stages of the party's development. I think this that we're looking at now, Smash, Slander, the study that we've just come out of the new period document, which was done in 1977, I think it was, some 5 years after the founding of the party. And that encompassed a lot of history of how events and struggles the party has been involved in. Along with this, contributes to hopefully an understanding that the revolutionary political party doesn't just drop out of the sky. And it is not something that one creates through a simple proclamation, that there's a process, and certainly there was a process involved in the development of our party. And I think if you will study any history of revolutionary parties, revolutionary organization, you will understand perhaps better what it is that I'm talking about. But this is what we're exploring. And I think part of what we should get out of this, one, again, is the history of the development of the party, the process of the party becoming what it is now, even as it is in the process of becoming and growing what it will be in the following period. Also, I think that what it is that we want to do is help to really understand something about how to struggle correctly. When we say correctly in this instance, the objective of involving ourselves in these criticism, self-criticism, and a certain kind of polemics that we have initiated or responded to is to grow the capacity of a revolutionary movement, to grow the capacity of our party and our struggle for our liberation. And ours is a party, and it's worth reminding everybody of this, and of course, all of the party members and supporters of our party, all the friends and allies of our party, that ours is a party of revolution, that our objective is a total liberation of Africa and African people globally, and our unification. This is not a party that is attempting to find favor with imperialism, with white power, with a colonizer, with a colonial capitalist system. It is not an organization that's attempting to do anything like that. So it's an incredibly powerful objective that we've established for ourselves. That is the total liberation and unification of Africa and African people under the leadership of the African working class. And we've concluded some time ago that for this to happen, it takes a special kind of organization, and it takes a special kind of cadre, development of a certain kind of membership that comes into this organization that is capable of placing the freedom, the liberation of our people first and foremost, above all other things. That we're talking about an organization of professional revolutionaries, an organization of individuals who come into it, who, whatever their occupations may be, may have been, their profession is revolution. And this is something about how serious we see the question we are confronted with. We, like you, and most of the people who are around us, who you hear speaking all the time, people who come out to protest and demonstrations of it and of what happens to us. They are sickened by the conditions that we have to experience as a people globally. People want to assume that their children will have a decent future, a better future than we, and it's certainly Africa that has given so much, including all of its children scattered around the world, or many of its children scattered around the world, a whole continent that's been carved up. Our relationship to each other been truncated by powers that external forces that have come in to steal all Africa's resources and then have established a narrative that justifies it all and makes us, that is to say, the colonial subjects responsible for our own oppression, and attempts to persuade us that we should be actually grateful that the imperial powers have disrupted their otherwise comfortable lives to come to our rescue, to bring us civilization and sometimes Christianity. This is something that we reject totally. And as a revolutionary party, we understand as our responsibility to help the masses of African people, to provide leadership to the masses of people. We are that organization, the advanced detachment, the vanguard of the people, the vanguard of the class. And so I wanted to say that's part of what it is that it's important for us to understand, and that we think that part of what will be perceived through this process as well, again, in addition, that this is a part and has been a part of a party building process. It's the process of building and consolidating the African People's Socialist Party. This is what we're looking at when we're involved in this discussion. And secondly, we are looking at a demonstration through this of the party's long-going history to combat political slander as a legitimate form of polemics, of a legitimate form of intra-party or intra movement struggle, that slander undermines the struggle. It detracts from the revolution. And while it may win some points for people, groups who are engaged in slander, it takes everybody off point when it comes to the liberation of our people. And that's what it is that we're about. And our party has engaged vigorously at different times in political struggles and ideological struggles and what have you, but we have refused historically to engage in slander. And we have, the title of this pamphlet that we are studying from comes from a series of articles dealing with what we interpreted as a serious slander assault that was being made against the African People's Socialist Party. And part of the reason that we even did the pamphlet not only was to rectify any misunderstanding of who we are as a party, but to raise the struggle of our people out of the muck of the worst kind of misdirection that slander contributes to. It doesn't help people to find the door to the revolution. It might make some points and might even succeed in making one group look better to another, to people over another group, based on the ability to score slanderous points. But the question that we are always confronted with is, what does it do to advance the struggle of our people? And there's some struggles we have never entertained, never got involved in, that amounts to nothing but slander, because to do so would go beyond the question of rescuing our own reputation or protecting our reputation, or fending off assaults on our reputation, but it would sully the reputation of the whole revolutionary movement of our people. It would again take people off point. You can look at the history of various struggles that's happened throughout the world. And occasionally you will find slander. You will see the slander that was mounted against Marcus Garvey, where one organization who had achieved a certain amount of credibility went so far as to say that Garvey had raped a 13-year-old white girl. This came from the organ of the African Blood Brotherhood that was led by Sir Briggs during the 100 years or so ago. So we've seen that kind of thing, but we are opposed to it. We hope that the way we treat this question is something that people can see, that in discussing this contradiction with the AAPRP, we give a lot of space to an examination of the AAPRP's stated positions around various questions, examination of their stated positions and their practice. So it's not like we created something to and defined them based on some purely abstract assumption of our own. We've said, this is what they've said, this is what they've done, and this is how what they say connects to what they've done, and what they do. And this is our assessment of the meaning of what they say and what they do as far as it relates to our struggle. We believe that's a proper way of struggling. So now, right now, I think we're on page 12 of this document, and everyone should have access to it. And so I'm going to begin here, which is part 2. And we've already talked about that in the early part of this discussion, the first part of this discussion, that we were concerned about certain attacks being made against the African People's Socialist Party, and that our intention to deal with them. So here in part 2, we began on page 12, the first public mention of problems existing between the All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP, and the African People's Socialist Party, APSP, in the Burning Spear was the June 1977 Special African Liberation Day edition. In that issue of the Burning Spear, we mentioned the fact that AAPRP leading member Willie Ricks demanded that we, the APSP, quote, drop everything you're doing, unquote, to go to Washington. And quoting further from that article in June 1977, the AAPRP also went so far as to spread unprincipled slander of APSP in Massachusetts, Atlanta, and Washington, D.C. Apparently because APSP was also engaged in independent ALD activities throughout Florida, in Atlanta, and Louisville, Kentucky. And despite the efforts made by the African People's Socialist Party to express unity and willingness to promote the All African People's Revolutionary Party's DC mobilization. And it went so far as to say that the next issue of the Spear will explore the APSP-AAPRP contradiction in depth. The article continued. So the June issue of the Spear, which barely suggested the contradictions between AAPRP and APSP, prompted a letter to APSP in July from a woman member of the AAPRP who is an ex-member of the APSP. In the letter, the woman declared appreciation for the Special African Liberation Day edition, stating, quote, I enjoyed its analysis until I got to the AAPRP criticism. It, I think, will create problems rather than deal with them. If the purpose of the criticism was to create antagonism, then the article was probably successful. Let's say an organization printed a criticism about APSP. I sincerely believe APSP response would be the criticism amounted to slander. Now, in the Burning Spear article, a statement was made that AAPRP is slandering APSP. That may be APSP's interpretation. Maybe AAPRP feels is a criticism grounded in reality. So you can see we may have a vicious circle, the letter continued. The comment also suggested that if APSP were truly, quote unquote, truly interested in dealing with problems between the two groups, unquote, we would have, quote, found a way to deal with them in a more private and above board manner, unquote. The letter criticizes African People's Socialist Party for having never, quote, to my knowledge, unquote, written to AAPRP to state that problems exist and we need to, quote, sit down and talk about them, unquote. The letter went on to warn us that the AAPRP's communication network is as large or larger than APSP Burning Spear mail out. This is the quote. This letter was received in July, prior to publication of the August issue of the Burning Spear, where the particular incidents of slander were spelled out. Therefore, we do not know if the Comrade Sisters' position remains the same since its publication. Nevertheless, serious criticism were raised in the letter, which should be examined, as they may also be harbored by others from whom we've not heard. In the first place, we feel the letter was rather presumptuous in that it was written prior to our having spelled out the problem existing between All African People's Revolutionary Party and the African People's Socialist Party. Therefore, we are unable to understand how the sister was able to reach most of the conclusions put forth in her letter. However, we can plainly state that the article in the June issue of the Spear was not designed to, quote, create antagonisms, unquote, as suggested in the Comrade Sisters letter. In fact, the article did little more than state the fact that the contradictions between the two parties would be explored in depth in a later issue of the paper. Nor was the August issue of the Spear, where that exploration was begun, designed to create antagonisms. Indeed, we of the African People's Socialist Party saw the need to raise the contradictions as a possible means of heading off antagonisms by exposing the slander of our party, raising the level of the discussion, and making it possible to engage in principled struggle around ideological and political questions. Moreover, contrary to the Comrade Sisters' suggestion, we do not see criticism as a bad thing or equate criticism with slander. There are several organizations with whom we presently enjoy fraternal relationships and with whom we anticipate principled struggle and criticism and self-criticism. The African People's Socialist Party recognizes such struggle as a needed element in our movement, not to be avoided, but to be promoted for the benefit and development of our entire movement. We have also been long opposed to slander, as the sister comrade and Chairman Stokely Carmichael are well aware. It was the Burning Spear that denounced the September 5th, 1970 slander of Stokely Carmichael in the Black Panther newspaper, where Panther leader Huey P. Newton accused Carmichael of being a CIA agent. While we had no information one way or the other as to whether Carmichael was an agent, we criticized Newton for making such a serious charge concerning, quote, one of the most trusted and loved Black men in the entire Black world, unquote, stating, quote, it appears to us that more evidence should be presented to the people than what Huey P. Newton showed us. If Carmichael or anyone else is an agent, he ought to be dealt with. But if he is an agent, give us some information to prove it, unquote, the article challenged. But back to the question of whether our view of the AAPRP activities were correctly labeled as slander, or whether that view is simply an African People's Socialist Party subjective interpretation. What better way to determine it than by putting the evidence forward for judgment by all the movement and the entire people? Our attempts to build unity with the AAPRP is well documented. We have demonstrated over and over during our commitment to a united independence movement that included unity between APSP and AAPRP as the main ingredient. While the Comrade Sisters letter was in response to the June article, the August edition of the Spear details a history of attempting to unite with the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Moreover, as far as writing the AAPRP suggesting the need to quote unquote sit down and talk about our problems, prior to the recent past, we did not know problems existed that demanded we have a conference. And when we did learn of the problems, they were of such a nature and occurred at such a time that the best interests of our party were served by attempting to set the record straight for those who may have been confused by publicly uttered misstatements about our party. However, we are justly offended by the suggestion that we were not, quote unquote, above board in our dealing with the AAPRP. Indeed, it is the fact that we were above board that the comrade sister was able to be aware of the contradiction between us, as was anyone in the world who read of them in the Burning Spear. And as I have said, we have written several times to All African People's Revolutionary Party suggesting the need for unity. Indeed, as stated in the August issue of the Spear, our last letter to AAPRP just prior to ALD activities expressed our solidarity with the AAPRP ALD efforts scheduled for Washington, D.C., requested information so that APSP might give limited assistance and publish AAPRP ALD plans in the Burning Spear. Our response dated April 30 from AAPRP was what we have come to know as typically AAPRP, stating in part, quote, "As you can see, the 2 days are full of activities and regrettably, no additions can be made at this stage. Thank you again for your interest in helping to make ALD a success. ALD 77 will signal a qualitative leap in our struggle to build the AAPRP." In any event, the August issue of the Spear attempted to show where relations between the two parties are now. The following letter to AAPRP Chairman Stoker Carmichael, dated April 18th, 1977, a full 12 days prior to the above mentioned AAPRP response, from the same comrade sister who recently wrote the criticism to us, gives some of the history of how the relations between APSP and AAPRP got this way. This is the letter, quote, "Greetings, Brother Stoker. This is the letter that the sister who criticized us at one point, but the letter that she had sent to Carmichael. Greetings, Brother Stokely. I have been intending to write this since we last talked in Tuskegee regarding my commitment to you about Joseph Waller." I was called Joseph Waller at this time. "My need to follow through on this was reinforced when I saw Brother Joe in Florida during an emergency trip there. When you were in Tuskegee last, November 1975, I mentioned there were some problems, but because we were always rushing and with so very little privacy, I did not go into an explanation, so I will now. First, let me begin with some history. When I first met Brother Joe, his loyalty to you was very strong. It remained thus until the first meeting to formally build AAPRP in North Carolina, to which Joe was invited. However, some criticism did surface directly after your speaking tour in Florida. One was your statement made to sisters, chauvinists, in Tallahassee and Gainesville. The other was raised by me after hearing a statement you made to Cleve Sellers about Joe while he was speaking in St. Petersburg. I won't go into the exact remark, but it was a put down on Joe. Think back, and you may remember. Of course, I was a loyal member of JOMO, the Hunter Militant Organizations, later become one of the group's former APSP, and consequently reported the remark. The meeting in Carolina followed. The letter continues. An invitation was given to Joe without an explanation of what to expect. He got there, received orders regarding his AAPRP organizational responsibilities, and responded by saying he could not decide to implement without a vote from JOMO members. After returning to Florida, and it was a little more than that, that meeting in North Carolina. It was a very extraordinary kind of meeting where I, along with a whole assortment of other people, was given an assignment and included into what was supposed to be the Central Committee of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And this, without having said anything to me prior to arriving in North Carolina. And the reason we happened to be involved in a process then was because I had, and Jomo had initiated a tour for Stokely after hearing, especially Stokely was married then to Miriam Makeba, who was a formidable activist from occupied Azania or South Africa, and who once upon marrying Stokely Carmichael, who was notorious as the Black Power leader, lost all kinds of contracts, and there was a boycott of her that put a lot of economic pressures on them. And so a call was made for people to facilitate a tour, speaking tour, that would allow Carmichael to make some money, and also, if possible, to even establish concerts where Miriam Makeba would be able to perform. And so we did that and did the tour, and it was a successful tour in Florida. And it was after Carmichael had gone through the tour, gone and left, that they got in touch asking me to come to this meeting in North Carolina. So without saying what it was all about. So again, the meeting in Carolina, bottom of page 13, last paragraph from page 13. The meeting in Carolina followed. An invitation was given to Joe without an explanation of what to expect. He got there, received orders regarding his AAPRP organizational responsibilities, and responded by saying he could not decide to implement without a vote from JOMO members. After returning to Florida, the members voted to continue our plans of converging 3 Florida-based organizations into a party called APSP. And this, by the way, is something that, this is the letter that was sent to Carmichael that we printed here. Oh, I should include something here. Once when talking to Willie Ricks about Joe, he said that Joe was given a chance to come with the party. This, he means All African People's Revolutionary Party, but he was only interested in having his own thing, to the extent that he even copied the name of the party by calling his party APSP. Prior to your tour in Florida, and this continues the letter to Carmichael, and the North Carolina meeting, plans had already been made for the 3 groups to merge and form the African People's Socialist Party. There was a whole history of that. I mean, we had begun a process of meetings throughout the state of Florida, where virtually every organization of anti-colonial tendency in the state of Florida was participating in regular, at least monthly meetings held in different cities in the state of Florida, with the objective, from our perspective, being to create a party. And that was disrupted. One of the several disruptions that occurred, and by obviously police intervention. And so that's that. I just wanted to add that history, because it's not that somehow Stokely Carmichael and AAPRP descended or ascended, depending on one's view, and it gave us an opportunity to be AAPRP that we declined, and then scurried away to build something that we would not have been doing anyway. So the sister continues in her letter. Then Jomo's resistance against joining AAPRP was, I think, reflecting back based on your statements made to sisters. The remark about Joe and the manner in which the request or order was made to Joe regarding AAPRP organizational responsibilities. This was compounded by statements made to me, this is the sister, by Cleve, regarding the conversion of the Burning Spear with other nationalist, Pan-Africanist newspapers. After the refusal was made, Cleve Sellers talked with me, saying in essence, the conversion could be made even though Joe disagreed if I handled it right. As a member of JOMO, I again reported our conversation, and the general consensus was Cleve's plan amounted to sabotage. Although Joe apparently cooled somewhat in his loyalty to you, and although there were some tactical and strategical differences, Joe advocated no criticism of AAPRP in the Burning Spear. His position was based on the two parties' ideological unity, although there seemed to be a few semantical differences. Although Joe continued to talk warmly of you and to say how much you had taught him. Rick said to me during the same conversation mentioned earlier, in essence, that Joe had a large ego and wanted to be the sole person in the limelight. Jomo's failure to combine with AAPRP was not because of Joe's ego, at least not that kind of ego. From my impression, when you and Joe first met, this is the letter she's writing to Carmichael, Joe was in fact green. In subsequent years, he learned a lot from you indeed. But as dialectical materialists, we understand that everything changes, and Joe's development changes. When you saw him during your tour in Florida in 1971, he was no longer green Joe, and maybe even at that time, one of the most developed persons in North America. I felt you treated him as the same person you first met. When you saw him in Tuskegee, without doubt, he has developed into one of the best theoreticians of our struggle that our struggle has to offer. If you investigate thoroughly, you may find this to be true. Joe was somewhat upset at the way you greeted him on stage in Tuskegee. He felt it was condescending. Of course, I realized that this may have been an overreaction. Also, he expressed concern over AAPRP's neglect in answering an APSP letter regarding ALD 1976 activities. I just included this because I just thought of it. Now back to the subject preceding the ALD statement. If there was ego involved, it surfaced only in such incidents as the aforementioned, I believe. When I saw Joe earlier this month, a leading AAPRP member was with me. He, Joe, voiced a sincere concern and wish to develop a close relationship with AAPRP and a possible conversion of the two parties in the future. He said that there were some differences, the biggest being how AAPRP dealt with, or maybe failure to deal with, national struggle issues in North America. He showed us a letter he had just completed to you, where he expressed a desire to contribute as much as APSP could to organize around ALD. Joe said to me that it was not an attempt to speak on the ALD platform. I spent a day with him in St. Petersburg after the leading AAPRP member left. We talked mostly of you and AAPRP. My impression is that Joe has a serious desire for our party and APSP to begin a strong relationship, and if possible, become one party. I adamantly feel that Joe is not opportunistic, and his desire to develop the aforementioned is based on the need of our struggle and nothing else. Developing a functional working relationship or conversion can only advance the two parties, thus our struggle. The few incidents that may have caused a down in communication between you two are minute in comparison to the strong alliance he has, that's Joe, always expressed in relationship to you, and most of all, your comradeship. The leading AAPRP member said he is going to propose a meeting. I hope serious consideration will be given to this, unquote. So I just wanted to, I think this letter is really important. This sister, who had once been a member of the African People's Socialist Party, in fact, she was a founding member of the party, was now a member of the AAPRP. And so she's writing this letter, I think, given as well as possible for her, an objective assessment to what she sees as the contradictions that are unfolding and talking about, of course, that the party has never attacked them. So beginning on page 15, from her own letter then, it is clear that our comrade sister was unreasonable in her criticism of the June article of the Burning Spear. But more importantly, it is clear that our intentions and activities regarding AAPRP have always been principled in the face of a history of questionable activities by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. It is quite possible, and indeed probable, that some will read the criticism we have been making of Aaprp as a disunifying, fratricidal bloodletting. That is unfortunate. However, there is a proper and principled way for comrades to struggle, and a movement must necessarily demand that they be adhered to. Otherwise, there will be a terrible bloodletting, as our vicious class enemies and national oppressors have demonstrated a vicious propensity for advancing slander and distrust among us, and then self-murder as a logical consequence of our susceptibility to slander and unprincipled attacks. This is one reason we cannot regard the contradictions between the African People's Socialist Party and the Aaprp as a private matter between the two parties, for the attacks against us represent a style of work that must be politically exorcised from our midst. There are other reasons also. They have their basis in political and ideological differences, which for the benefit of our movement must be put forward as we struggle for the correct line and advance the general ideological development of our movement. I will attempt to examine them in the next and final article concerning this matter. So that takes us to page 15 in part 3. Here are the words with which the late Dr. Kwame Nkrumah closed his book, Class Struggle in Africa, considered by many to be his best work. We quote, "The African revolutionary struggle is not an isolated one. It not only forms part of the world's socialist revolution, but must be seen in the context of the Black Revolution as a whole. In the USA, the Caribbean, and wherever Africans are oppressed, liberation struggles are being fought. In these areas, the Black man is in a condition of domestic colonialism and suffers both of the grounds of class and color. The core of the Black Revolution is in Africa. And until Africa is united under socialist government, the Black man throughout the world lacks a national home. It is around the African people's struggle for liberation and unification that African or Black culture will take shape and substance. Africa is one continent, one people, and one nation. The notion that in order to have a nation, it is necessary for there to be a common language, a common territory, and a common culture has failed to stand the test of time or the scrutiny of scientific definition of objective reality. Common territory, language, and culture may in fact be present in a nation, but the existence of a nation does not necessarily imply the presence of all three. Common territory or language alone may form the basis of a nation. Similarly, common territory plus common culture may be the basis. In some cases, only one of the three applies. A state may exist on a multinational basis. The community of economic life is a major feature within a nation, and it is in the economy which holds together, the people living in a territory. It is on this basis that the new Africans recognize themselves as potentially one nation, whose dominion is the entire African continent. The total liberation and unification of Africa under an all-African socialist government must be the primary objective of all Black revolutionaries throughout the world. It is an objective which, when achieved, will bring about the fulfillment of the aspirations of Africans and people of African descent everywhere. It will at the same time advance the triumph of the international socialist revolution and the onward progress toward world communism, under which every society is ordered on the principle of from each according to his ability and to each according to his needs." Unquote. These words by Nkrumah are probably the best public summary available of the ideological position of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, which refers to his ideology as Nkrumahism and Pan-Africanism. And although we have some problems with that portion of Dr. Nkrumah's formulation dealing with the criterion for a nation, the essential aspects of the ideology of the African People's Socialist Party are also summarized by Dr. Nkrumah's words above. We recognize ourselves as African internationalists. So therefore, if there are differences in our two parties, they clearly do not revolve around what we both put forth as our basic ideological premise. Yet we do contend that there are differences. And eventually these differences will have that basis in absolute ideological questions as they have that basis in political questions today. Moreover, it is our contention that the recent slander the African People's Socialist Party has experienced from the Aaprp is a manifestation of an Aaprp political shortcoming, which may be an indication that the present course of the Aaprp is an abandonment of African liberation and communism explicit in the above quoted text. That Aaprp political problem is fundamental and will keep it on a collision course with the US-based African liberation struggle, lead it down a course of irreversible dogmatism, and transform it into a reactionary sect, which can act as a brake on the revolutionary initiative of African people colonized within US borders. This fundamental political problem is the absence of a political line to advance the struggle within current US borders. And flowing from this, the absence of a strategy for African liberation that considers the colonial subjugation of more than 30 million African people subjected to illegitimate US imperialist rule within its own borders. This Aaprp shortcoming has led it to raise the task of building the Aaprp to a strategic level. Hence, the basis for Aaprp's contradiction with any pro-independence formation that does not share its self-serving strategic objective. Hence, the substitution of slander for struggle around differences in political lines and strategy. Hence, the absence of day-to-day political struggle that would flow from a strategy for liberation and through which political line is formed and tested. In a paper titled The All African People's Revolutionary Party, an Independent Revolutionary Political Party dated May 1977, and designed to introduce people to Aaprp, it is clearly stated, quote, at this stage of its development, the only program of the Aaprp is to build the party, unquote. This party building program was the basis for Aaprp's involvement in the African Liberation Day 1977 activity that it initiated in Washington, DC as an Aaprp party building action. It was also the basis of Aaprp's hostility toward any other pro-independence ALD action anywhere else within current US borders, leading Aaprp members to attempt to smash ALD activities independent of its control, as they must necessarily have been viewed as competing threats to Aaprp's party building program. The absence of a line and strategy for liberation that includes Africans within current US borders has forced the Aaprp into what is today known as a Trotskyist-type posture of permanent opposition within the US-based African liberation movement, a posture that is inherently opportunist and sectarian. Consequently, although Aaprp pays much lip service to the creation of a united front, it is bound to sectarian isolation by virtue of its self-serving strategic objective. Consequently, it was unable to do united front work to build ALD, as the united front by its very nature could not have united with Aaprp's objective of making ALD an Aaprp party building action. The absence of a line and strategy for liberation also locks the Aaprp into a posture of non-struggle and the politics of what Aaprp Chairman Stokely Carmichael terms non-confrontation. Consequently, one of the major criticisms put forth against Aaprp at an April 1977 meeting of pro-independence forces in Massachusetts was that the Aaprp members don't do any political work. This posture of non-struggle, which flows from the absence of line and strategy, also partially explains Aaprp's policy of not supporting Black political prisoners and its view that Black Women's United Front could be antagonistic to the aims of African liberation. Dealing with a January 1975 meeting, which reconvened participants of a Congress of African Peoples sponsored efforts to organize the Black Women's United Front, Aaprp put forth this statement in a paper entitled Aaprp Towards Building a Black United Front. Quote, a Black woman's United Front must, by its very name, address itself predominantly to the issues and concerns of African women. Such a tendency would be divisive in the long run in terms of the total liberation of African people. Therefore, it must see as its only objective at this particular point in the historical development of our struggle the development of united fronts for all segments of the African community, with emphasis at the local level, of which it could then be an integral part, unquote. The paper continues, quote, since African women have initiated a call for unity within the African community, we must now move correctly beyond the narrow concerns of African women to the broader concerns of African people. We must see the Black Women's United Front as a vehicle for the development of a Black United Front for all segments of the African community. Here, several things are obvious. That was the end of the quote. So here, several things are obvious. Although there was another place in the Aaprp paper that stated unity with a statement made by then CAP Chairman Baraka, which recognized, quote, the struggle of African women was one with the struggle of African people, unquote. The Aaprp statement makes it clear that the struggle of African women is unequally one with the struggle of African people. Actually, the Aaprp position, which purports to show the unity of the struggle of African people with the aspirations of African women, does just the opposite. For after all, who are African women if not African people? And how revolutionary is a revolutionary movement if it does not integrate the aspirations of African women, aspirations which flow from the special problems of women as African people into its overall program and strategy for liberation? The problem here, however, is that the Aaprp does not have a political line or strategy for liberation other than building the Aaprp. Another obvious thing from the Aaprp statement is that the Aaprp's abdication of practical leadership for the masses of our people within current US borders. The Black Women's United Front is not, from the Aaprp's perspective, to build a mass movement of women around the special problems of women who are also colonial subjects and into which the theories of socialism, independence, African internationalism can be integrated, thereby pushing our total liberation initiative further forward. Rather, it must see as its only objective at this particular point in the historical development of our struggle, the development of united fronts for all segments of the African community. Of course, such an effort by African women who are being told there cannot be struggles around their special interests and aspirations, as though their interests and aspirations are not a part of the aggregate reality confronted by African people, will relieve the Aaprp of the necessity to build Black United Fronts, the creation of which demands some minimum unity of principles around questions flowing from the concrete reality of the material conditions of our existence within current US borders. But since the Aaprp finds itself unable to struggle around political prisoners or confront our imperialist enemies around the day-to-day struggles of our people, or build united fronts or support struggle around the special problems of African women, what is it that it can do? Point 3 of its May 1977 paper, which puts forth programs and activities to build the Aaprp, plainly states that it does not, quote unquote, claim to be able to today to organize the masses of African people or solve any of the problems of our community, unquote. But its main organizational document, quote, All African People's Revolutionary Party Manifesto, does give us a hint of what it can do. So I'm on page 18, and now I'm quoting from the Aaprp document. The struggle here within the US is not tertiary. Even while the primary focus is on the unification of Africa, intermediary objective and short-term strategies must be designed with this in mind. We can begin to develop organizations, institutions, and programs which will, 1, enhance the development of progressive forces, and 2, ensure our survival while we work to, 3, improve the conditions of the Black masses. Page 16 of the same document states, our functions in the US in regards to the liberation struggle on the continent are to develop and to implement the resource of land, economics, and ideology in order to maximize political power. Only through the highest development of political power can we neutralize or reverse US interventions through NATO, puppet regimes, South Africa, Portugal, etc. Hence the need for mass-based political development through the creation and development of an all-African People's Revolutionary Party, mass political organization. The manifesto then identifies the resources for the development of political power as 1, land, 2, economic, and technological resources and systems, and 3, ideology, and 4, military arms and weapons systems. Again, on page 17, the manifesto declares, since ideology is the one resource we have the greatest potential for development at this time in history, we must emphasize this development, unquote. So how does the AAPRP plan to do this? Well, point 2 of its May 1977 introductory paper declares, quote, the AAPRP's major activity or thrust is the organization of a worldwide network of work-study, pre-cadre, cadre, and support groups from among the college student sector of the African community. In order to do this, the party has organized a Sammy Young student organization organizing brigade. The brigade has been assigned the task of recruiting, organizing, training, and coordinating a new generation of professional revolutionary African college students who become the spark, the shock troops, the cadre of revolutionary organizers who educate, mobilize, and organize the African masses and coordinate their revolutionary political activity, unquote. The All African People's Revolutionary Party has a one-sided, metaphysical approach to all questions. Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, the great African freedom fighter and philosopher, to whose ideas AAPRP pays constant homage, was not a metaphysicist. His was an all-sided or dialectical approach to all questions. His was a revolutionary approach that considered all things and processes in their interconnectedness in relationship to their change and development, and while recognizing their coming into being and dying away. Thus, Nkrumah, when talking about the African liberation movement, stated in his book, Class Struggle in Africa, quote, the African revolutionary struggle is not an isolated one. It not only forms part of the world revolution, but must be seen in the context of the Black revolution as a whole. In the USA, the Caribbean, and wherever Africans are oppressed, liberation struggles are being fought. In these areas, the Black man is in a condition of domestic colonialism and suffers both on the grounds of class and color. Yet the AAPRP has only been able to concentrate on one part of Nkrumah's formulation concerning the relationship of the overall African liberation movement to Africa. They remember that Nkrumah stated that, quote, the core of the Black revolution is in Africa, unquote. And that he said, quote, the total liberation and unification of Africa under an all-African socialist government must be the primary objectives of all Black revolutionaries throughout the world, unquote. But they have liquidated in practice the terms core and primary used by Nkrumah. In practice, they have liquidated the fact that Nkrumah defined the conditions of Africans within current US borders as domestic colonialism, a condition that carries with it a specific set of circumstances, which on the one hand flows from our historic experience as Africans, while on the other hand differs in specificity from the conditions in Guinea or Ghana or Kenya. For AAPRP, the African liberation struggle can be summed up as the Black revolution is in Africa, or as the total liberation and the unification of Africa must be the only objective of all Black revolutionaries throughout the world. Consequently, the AAPRP has no political line to guide practice within the US, nor do they have a strategy for liberation from US domestic colonialism. Consequently, AAPRP does not have the political basis for joining and leading struggle against our US imperialist enemies, and can only see itself building the AAPRP and developing, quote, organizations, institutions, and programs, which will, 1, enhance the development of progressive forces, and 2, ensure our, that is to say, AAPRP survival while we work to, 3, improve the conditions of the Black masses, unquote. All right. So Nkrumah, who was a dialectician and revolutionary, stated that in the US, and I'm quoting now, the Caribbean and wherever Africans are oppressed, liberation struggles are being fought, unquote. The AAPRP, however, which sees all things in a metaphysical way, talks about ensuring our survival while we work to, quote, improve the conditions of the masses. They do not say a word about the liberation struggles which are being fought. Engels had this to say of metaphysicians in the introduction to his book, Anti-During. To the metaphysician, things and their mental images, ideas are isolated to be considered one after the other, apart from each other. rigid, fixed objects of investigation given once and for all. He thinks in an absolutely irreconcilable antithesis. For him, a thing either exists or it does not exist. It is equally impossible for a thing to be itself and at the same time something else, unquote. Elaborating further, we say that for him, we are either only working for the Black Revolution in Africa or we are not working for the Black Revolution. For him, if the total liberation and unification of Africa is not the only objective of all Black revolutionaries, they are not making the African Revolution. And since in the absence of line and strategy, the AAPRP has equated building the AAPRP with making the African liberation struggle, if one is not prepared to, quote unquote, drop everything you're doing and build an AAPRP activity called as an AAPRP party building action, one is in the camp of reaction. For the metaphysicist, things and processes are immutable and unchanging. The metaphysicist thinks of humanity in the abstract. Consequently, the only statement we can get from the AAPRP concerning its relationship to our people is its intent to, quote unquote, work to improve the condition of the Black masses. Everything is Africa, but what is Africa without its relationship to the people? And how the people have any meaningful control of their lives in a post-liberated Africa if they are not organized today around the life and death questions which threaten our very existence in this world? Africa, independent of its relationship with our people, is merely land. And if our people are not organized around self-felt needs, which are no less than the underdeveloped expressions of their real needs and aspirations, Africa stands the chance of becoming private property, even a post-liberated Africa. It is this metaphysicist character, the AAPRP's line, that relieves it of the responsibility of a political line and strategy as it relates to a US-based African liberation struggle. For the AAPRP, a struggle to liberate Africa, the territory is apparently sufficient. Perhaps it is for the AAPRP, but will never suffice to make a revolution within current US borders. And as far as we're concerned, nothing could better serve the cause of Africa than a successful revolutionary struggle within the US, which results in political independence for African people within current US borders, the destruction of the US imperialist state, and the advent of socialism. For Africans within current US borders, here's what the crux of the matter lies for us as our historical mission for total liberation. We are therefore faced with these questions. How do we carry out our responsibility to our people and our movement for total African liberation? 2, in carrying out our struggle for liberation, what is this relationship to the cause of socialist revolution within current US borders and the struggles of other subject peoples fighting the same imperialist enemy? There are other questions which we will not attempt to deal with here, but which must be confronted scientifically by our movement if we are to be successful. One of these questions must deal with the meaning for theoretical and strategic value of the probability that a significant sector of the African population will remain in the Americas even after Africa is liberated. Comrade Director Keeley, how do you want to proceed from here?
Chairman, I think we should go ahead and continue, finish.
All right, thank you. Okay, so, okay. In addressing ourselves to the questions above, the African People's Socialist Party arrived at this tentative strategy, which is subject to change with condition, our understanding of objective reality, and the contributions through struggle, criticism, and self-criticism of our comrades within the international movement for African liberation. 1, this is what we're looking at in terms of the strategy. Winning African people to the position of independence and socialism, that's the first thing. 2, that's number 1. 2, establishing the leadership of the pro-independence movement. Listen, I know this sounds, pretty, well, to certainly those of us in the party, and I guess in the Uhuru movement, this sounds relatively simple, but it's not that simple. This helps to, should help to explain our party's fierce opposition to silly or meaningless or misleading slogans, especially in the heat of this period where masses are rising up globally and looking for solutions outside of what the ruling class is clearly capable of providing. It's a moment in history where even where established governments under the system of colonial capitalism that came into existence through colonial capitalism some 600 years ago, the established system, the governments that have come about in the wake of the colonial slavery, colonialism in general around the world, but these governments are losing favor, not just in places like abroad from the United States, but also within the United States and within the centers of the empire, in England, in France, in Germany, in Hungary, and all these other places, and in the United States. The people have concluded, increasingly concluding that the governments and the system cannot meet their needs. That's what January 6th was about in this country when this group of settler colonialists attacked the US Capitol and almost overthrew the damn government, because even sectors of the colonizers find themselves unable to achieve what they need under colonial domination and under this colonial capitalist system. And part of the reason for that is the struggles that's being waged by colonized people as Africans, and people in Venezuela, and people in Iraq, and people in other places of the world, the struggles that people are making, which are actually placing stress on the ability of the colonial capitalist system to provide the resources, the goods, the stability that white people, the colonizers in the aggregate, are accustomed to. This is what they grew up expecting. And so increasingly you have this system under stress, and the responsibility of the revolutionary becomes more significant, weightier now than ever before. So we say that in the face of all of what we are looking at, in the face of the fact that people are losing faith in the existing governments under the existing social system, then we look at the strategy that the party is putting forth. One, winning African people to the position of independence and socialism, because capitalism and colonialism clearly are failing the people, even if it hasn't been well defined, although the party, the African People's Socialist Party, has taken the lead and is responsible for more and more people in the United States and other places defining the reality of Africans in the United States as colonialism. So the people have to find a way to break free of this thing, that's this chain around our neck, this hyphenated identity of being some kind of African-American or Afro-American or something to that extent. And it becomes increasingly the responsibility in winning people, African people, to the position of independence and socialism. And we help to train the people, help the people to understand and break free of this whole concept of Africans being citizens, with recognizing that citizenship, the whole concept of citizenship, is something that's conferred on a people by government, by the state. So if the government is falling into disfavor and more people understand the government does not work for us, then why the hell would you be trying to integrate into a failing system, a burning house, so to speak, to coin a phrase. Number two, establishing the leadership of the pro-independence movement. This should be easily understood. When we say that we detest this simple-minded, misleading Black Lives Matter kind of slogan as a response to what the hell is happening to us, it's not because we don't think Black Lives Matter. We know Black lives doesn't matter to the colonial capitalist system, and it presupposes first of all, that you don't have a program of your own, that you don't have any objectives of your own. It's more a plea, a complaint than it is it doesn't offer a demand. It doesn't suggest any kind of direction for the people, doesn't suggest any kind of solution. So your enemies can, and your enemies will, and your enemies do also take up the slogan, Black Lives Matter. And it doesn't mean a damn thing. It doesn't identify colonialism. It makes an assumption that somehow the system that is killing us, oppressing us, destroying us, the colonial capitalist system that came into existence through colonial slavery can solve the problem, that you can win it, you can plead to it, you can let it know that somehow Black Lives Matter, and that's the solution, when the question is to arm the masses of our people with a recognition of what the contradictions are. That's the responsibility of a revolutionary party. So number 3, winning support for the independence position within current U.S. borders. So I don't want anybody to be talking about you helping me with racism, you're doing me some kind of anti-racist politic, that et cetera. That's about you. That's not about me. When you talk about identifying racism as the primary contradiction, what you've done is put your white self in the center of the world. And what we're saying is you are not in the center. The question is colonial domination. And our struggle is not to win you to like us, to win you to be better, but to win our own freedom. And that we can to win anybody who can unite with us in overturning our colonial domination. That's why we say the support for the independence position within current U.S. borders. So if you can unite with us to struggle for independence, that's what you do. 4, creating dual or competing or contending state power. That's an anti-colonial. That's why we anti-colonial direction. That's why we say Black community control of the police. We creating our own power, our dual power. It's a power that undermines the colonial power of the U.S. government or any other entity in the world that would attempt to impose itself or reimpose itself on African people and define our reality, of which is the reinstatement of colonial domination. So we want to create our own power. And it's not just a power, but it's a competing or contending power. And this is something that I say it's a competing or contending power because you've seen in the past, I have, especially in the late part of the 1960s, Africans were creating these so-called independent institutions, but they were independent institutions that did not even attempt, didn't even try to compete with the ability, with the authority of the United States government. It was an assumption that somehow you can exist side by side inside this social system, which owes its existence as a parasite. It cannot exist except sucking the blood and sucking the resources of African people. And so we talking about creating a dual or competing or a contending state power. In other words, we are constructing our freedom while under colonialism, as opposed to constructing ability to live under colonialism, as implied in some of the statements put forth by the Aaprp. 5, exposing the oppressive nature of the United States government, not that it just committed a particular offense here, they shot somebody over here. You look at every day, you look at the stats, and you will see that numbers of Africans who are in prison, the death penalty charges, the police killings, the number of arrests of African people versus what are the real citizens who are the white people in this country. Everything that you see shows that something horrible is happening to us. So these are not simply incidents. This is the nature of the system. Expose the oppressive nature of U.S. government. 6, winning international support for the independence position. We want everybody around the world. I've traveled to Russia. I've traveled to all kinds of places around the world. And people and governments sometimes have their own interests in wanting to, quote unquote, support the poor Black people. I don't want your support, poor Black people. I want your support for our struggle for independence, not to get white people to like us in the United States, not even for you to like us, but support our position for independence. Around the world, peoples of the world must be supporting the struggle for independence for African people. And among the other things that it does is it creates an encirclement of US imperialism that is the enemy, the strategic enemy of everybody on the planet Earth. And number 7, building an African People's Liberation Army. So the 7 points listed here merely represent the APSP strategy for African liberation in skeletal form. For a more detailed and developed position on strategic objectives, see Tactics and Strategies for Black Liberation in the U.S. However, it will not do to list these objectives without making these observations in relationship to them. One, when we talk about realizing strategic objectives, winning our people to the position of independence, we should be prepared to do so through massive propaganda and agitation work while in the heat of mass felt and identified struggle. Two, if we are to talk about establishing the leadership of the independence movement as a strategic objective, we must clearly be prepared to take the offensive on mass issues. Our politics is meaningless if it is not tied to a process to better the material life of our people. And that process does not begin after liberation. Amilcar Cabral was correct when he said, always bear in mind that the people are not fighting for ideas, for the things in anyone's head. They are fighting to win material benefits, to live better and in peace, to see their children go forward, to guarantee the future of their children, unquote. This should tell us then that there must be unity of theory and practice, and that the mass movement we are talking about building must be tied to the material needs and struggles of our people in this world. Our theory should be capable of leading the day-to-day struggles, of being tested in the real world. If we are incapable of truly serving the people, if our theory prohibits through its inadequacy given practical leadership, assuming the offensive around the life and death questions, then we are undeserving of the people's confidence, and the people will not follow us, and there will be no real independence within our lifetime. Three, struggling to win support within current US borders for the independence position as a strategic objective for independence through self-liberation will help to sharpen our ideological development, smash the narrowness of our worldview, and demand continuity in our principles of unity. The main strategy for this effort to win support for the independence position should be the general anti-imperialist forces within current US borders, other oppressed, subject, and colonized nationalities, and progressive US North Americans. Four, to the degree our movement must assume, to the degree possible, our movement must assume the real and actual responsibilities of government for our people. This cannot be done by proclamation, but must be done over a period of time as the people gain confidence in us and their own abilities through actual practice. If we can do this, we will plunge a wooden stake into the heart of the imperialist blood-sucking vampire of the world. But it's not only true that US bourgeois democracy, which is capable of being so defined because of its ability to obscure its class and colonial dictatorship, cannot exist in the face of mass rejection, but to the degree we can effectively build competing state power, we actually negate the power of the US North American state. Such a strategic objective would allow us to transform every African community within current US borders into fighting Soviets for Africa, independence, and socialism. Five, all the progressive peoples and countries of the world are in unity with the aspirations of colonized peoples to win our liberation. This fact makes it necessary for even the US, which is the chief prop for the reactionary and colonial powers of the world, to pay lip service to the aspirations of people for independence. Today, the forces of anti-colonialism and liberation are the true makers of history, as we deliver the sharpest, most devastating blows to imperialism hourly throughout Africa, in the Middle East, Asia, and Latin America. Although the struggle for African liberation and political independence within current US borders has always been an integral part of the worldwide anti-imperialist, anti-colonial struggle, it has often, and especially most recently, not been recognized as such. Therefore, in attempting to realize the strategic objective of winning international support for the independence position, we will meet many initial roadblocks. Some of these difficulties will result from genuine ideological differences within the international community with our independence position, but many, and perhaps most, will stem from an opportunist interest by some international forces to establish and maintain hegemony over our movement through US-based proxy organizations for their own narrow nationalist interests. In this case, we are talking about how the waning period of the Soviet Union, what have you, where the Communist Party USA had the franchise, and how the Communist Party USA was opposed to the struggle for national liberation. In fact, had gone so far on one occasion to have declared the Black Liberation Army an organization of bandits. And so because of this, the Soviet Union was able to influence a certain supplicants, certain forces attached to it from to deny access to the burning spear, ideological and other kind of stuff that we have been previously putting forth throughout the world. So whatever the reasons for the initial resistance of international support for our independence position, it must be overcome. And it will be overcome to the extent we realize the strategic objective of winning our people here in this country to the position of independence. So no matter how ideologically committed to another definition of our struggle, or how opportunistic some international forces may be, they will be unable to deny the obvious political conclusions demonstrated by the masses of US domestically colonized Africans, just as during the Garvey movement. International support for our independence position will provide some bonuses for us, not the least of them being world acceptance of our right and need to have an African People's Liberation Army. Obviously, we of the African People's Socialist Party do not have all the answers, nor do we pretend. But we do know that the answers will be forthcoming as we continue our study and our attempts to provide concrete leadership through self-liberation. There is no other way to discover the answers, for as all consistent materialists know, truth is concrete. Actually, to achieve the aims put forth by Nkrumah, the Aaprp, and the APSP will require an international division of labor of African communists. This division of labor, organized around the principles set forth by Nkrumah, will demand creation of an African Socialist International of independent African organizations thrust by imperialism into the various imperialist created territories. This international cannot be created by proclamation, but must be viewed as part of the international program for those of us committed to the aims of African internationalism. An African Socialist International thereby automatically guarantees that all our struggle, united through the international, advances the initiatives to liberate and unite Africa under socialism, but also promotes our understanding of the continuing necessity of understanding and struggling for African liberation based on a strategy implicit in our conditions of existence wherever we are. We feel we have disclosed the basic cause for the recent contradictions between the APSP and the Aaprp. We do not believe they are necessarily irreconcilable. We certainly hope they are not. For the Aaprp, after resolving its internal contradictions, can make a contribution to our struggle. Moreover, it can never be denied that Chairman Stokely Carmichael, a classic product of African people's struggle within current US borders, indeed a living monument to the greatness of our struggle, did teach us all of my generation. It is in recognition of this reality that we of the African People's Socialist Party entreat our comrades of the Aaprp to smash slander and to build principal unity. Uhuru, comrade. Comrade Director Akile. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you so much for this incredible study and the conclusion of Smash, Slander, Build, Principled Unity. And, we do have lots of questions, so I'm going to just move it forward for the sake of time. But I just really wanted to salute this piece and this dynamic struggle that happened that is, teaching us all of this generation really important lessons. So we're going to go ahead and first, before we get into our Q&A portion, we're going to take a look at our announcements. So if we get those pulled up, please. So this study was brought to you by the Department of Agitation and Propaganda, Winning the War of Ideas. For your worldwide revolutionary news and analysis, you can visit theburningspear.com. Order, and this is where, this struggle was documented in the Spear. Order and distribute the Burning Spear newspaper and become a subscriber today. Get a 1-year subscription, 12 issues delivered straight to your door for $25, or the new digital subscription option. Get a combo of both for 20% off. You can gift a subscription to comrades and family members, and you can do all of this by going to theburningspear.com/subscribe. And next, since its founding in 1968, the Burning Spear newspaper has covered struggles to free African people from U.S. colonial prisons, including historic campaigns led by the African People's Socialist Party. The Spear regularly prints letters and articles by our brothers and sisters held captive and mails copies of the paper free of charge to over 600 prisoners each month through the Mafundi Lake sponsored prisoner subscription program. So we have just a few days remaining of Black August up to August 31st and beyond, of course. We're calling on you to donate to the Burning Spear, theburningspear.com/donate, make a one-time donation or become a monthly sustainer. And here are just some of the givebacks you receive when you donate. Depending on your levels, become a $5 a month sustainer. You get this flag, the African People's Socialist Party official flag, enamel pin. $10 a month gets you a struggle bag and a pin. $20 a month gets you a t-shirt, struggle bag, and the enamel pin, and $100 a month or $1,000 one-time donation gets you a hoodie, t-shirt, struggle bag, and an enamel pin. So go ahead again and donate to theburningspear.com/donate this Black August. Next, Omali Taught Me airs on Black Power 96 FM radio, a project of the African People's Education and Defense Fund with the slogan, not just explaining the world, but changing it. Listen on 96.3 FM in St. Pete, Florida, or streaming online at blackpower96.org and on the free Black Power 96 mobile app that you can download from your Apple App Store or your Android Google Play Store. Next. The theory of African internationalism is a theory of practice. All the energy of the African People's Socialist Party is focused on the destruction of colonial capitalism. Africans of the world, go to our website, apsp.uhuru.org, and fill out our contact form. Build Project Black Ankh. Register and tune in for an important fundraiser to raise awareness and support for Project Black Ankh. It's today, Sunday, August 29th at 3 p.m. Central Time. Developed by the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project, APDEP. Project Black Ankh is the African nation's disaster preparedness and emergency response program. Africa's future in African hands. Register at tinyurl.com/buildpba, that's Project Black Ankh, and consider making a donation to this important African-led program for self-determination. You are invited to attend the 2021 convention of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement in PDEM from September 3rd to the 5th, and PDEM will be convening a historic convention where we will discuss Black problems and Black solutions made by Black people. It's also the 30-year anniversary of PDEM's founding. We say it's 2021, African Workers Unite, and let's get it done. We are calling on all Africans to join us at 4101 West Florissant Street, St. Louis, Missouri on September 3rd through the 5th. And actually the 3rd and the 5th are going to be virtual. The 4th is for residents in St. Louis. Again, September 3rd to the 5th, 2021. We will also be live streaming on Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube throughout the weekend. Register today at tinyurl.com/mpdem Convention 2021. Next, order your copy of Chairman Omali Yeshitela's latest books, Vanguard, The Advanced Attachment of the African Revolution, An Uneasy Equilibrium, and many more works by the chairman and leaders of our movement at burningspearmarketplace.com. Like and follow the Lowezi Kinshasa like page on Facebook for more African internationalist political education. Secretary General Lowezi Kinshasa does frequent live events, such as the War of Ideas series. He includes live sessions done in French. To get alerts of when SG Lowezi is going live, make sure to like and follow his page today. Tune into White Lies Shattered, the new series of the Reparations in Action podcast featuring Penny Hess, chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee, along with the Uhuru Solidarity Movement chair Jesse Neville and its host Jamie Simpson. Check out the podcast on uhurusolidarity.podbean.com or wherever you listen to podcasts for a series that challenges and exposes the distortion of history by the colonial ruling class and reveals the truth about the past, present, and future from the eyes of the African working class. Uhuru Foods and Pies Oakland is hiring for a part-time baker. Culinary training is preferred. Join the work to build an independent African economy by baking for Black power. To apply, email your resume to oakland.volunteer@uhurufoods.org or mail your resume to 7911 MacArthur Boulevard, Oakland, California, 94605, or call 800-578-5157 for more information. Make your legacy a taste of freedom. Uhuru Furniture and Collectibles in both Oakland and Philly are hiring full-time truck drivers and full-time marketing coordinators. Do you have driving and furniture lifting skills, social media and print marketing experience? Can you work Wednesday through Sunday? If so, apply for these positions and contribute your labor and skills to this institution of the African People's Education and Defense Fund. Every day you can work with an amazing team and go home knowing that you're helping to build the independent African economy. Her furniture is just one of the ways APEDF is paving the way for genuine economic development in the African community. What do you want your legacy to be? Apply by visiting our website in Oakland, uhurufurniture.blogspot.com, and in Philadelphia, that's uhurufurniturephilly.blogspot.com. On Tuesday nights from 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern, join Ralph Pointer on What's Happening Blog Talk Radio. Tune in by calling 347-857-3293. Ralph Pointer sits on the Black is Back Coalition Steering Committee and chairs the BIBC's Political Prisoners Working Group and also leads the Lynn Stewart Committee. We're also calling on people to follow the All African Peoples Development and Empowerment Project on Facebook or visit developmentforafrica.org for important information and helpful tips in regards to the colonial virus COVID-19. Aaprp has an international telehealth program, which is a free resource for African people to get our COVID-19 related questions and concerns answered by licensed doctors and nurses through Project Black Ankh. You can make your free virtual appointment with one of their professional health providers by going to developmentforafrica.org/telehealth. And to keep up with our movement events, visit the burningspear.com's events page and subscribe to our mailing list. Next. And of course, make sure you like and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study, and donate to PayPal at paypal.me/Omali Taught Me. So that's it for our announcements. Thank you so much, engineer. And we're going to go ahead now and get into the Q&A segment of our program. And of course, we want to acknowledge where some people are viewing from: St. Louis, Missouri, San Diego, California, Oakland, California, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Chicago, Illinois, Battle Creek, Michigan, Huntsville, Alabama, Richmond, Virginia, Irvington, New Jersey, Ohio, Hempstead, New York, Grenada, West Indies, Los Angeles, California, Marion County, Georgia, Germany, Jamaica, and St. Petersburg, Florida. So thank you guys for tuning in where you're located. And we're going to go ahead and get into the Q&A, Chairman. So we had a few questions from last week regarding the same piece, Smash Slander. And this question came from Chairman Matsamela. Aaprp, can you explain the relationship between principled criticism and ideological development?
Oh, thank you, Comrade. Yeah, the fact is that we're all engaged all the time in the process. If we are actively engaged in struggle, we are always in the process of learning and how to make the struggle better. And we don't do that in a static situation. It's in our relationship with the world that we learn and we get better. And when you have others who engage in the same struggle in particular, who express differences about what it is, then we have an opportunity to learn, to correct our own message, our own direction, or to improve upon it, and to also struggle against bad ideas and tendencies that might be reflected in the struggle that we're having. So ideological struggle is not bad, it's good. It helps to develop our movement. When you don't see that, then you see stagnation. That's one of the things that that's really bothered us for many, many years. You go back for years and you'll see that most of the polemics that we've been engaged in have been based on the fact that the African Revolution was not the African Revolution. I'm not talking about academics or something to that effect. Was not really developing revolutionary theory, or didn't take revolutionary theory seriously, so we think that that's how we develop. We think that's a part of the way that we develop. We do the work, and we engage in an ongoing critique of the work that we do, and then in so doing, others will be critiquing our work and giving us an opportunity to learn from what they have to say, or dispelling what they have to say, and teaching them. So it's a positive thing, not a negative thing. And that's been really important, because we live in a situation, and that's African. We live in a situation where people are accustomed to blaming and avoiding blame, and that allows us to, it doesn't require us to look at our contradictions and problems and say how we can get better. And that's what criticism and self-criticism is all about.
Aaprp, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Comrade Matsamela, for your question. Again, taking a look at questions coming in from last week, we had Comrade Jamal. He asked, Aaprp, Comrade Chairman, has the Aaprp ever addressed or resolved this criticism?
No, the Aaprp has a tendency, they've done all kinds of things. They said on one occasion that the criticism was because of some kind of personality contradiction between me and Kwame Ture, or they said that the reason that we were waging struggle is because at some point the African People's Socialist Party wanted to initiate a coup in Liberia, I think it was, and that the AAPRP disagreed. Another time they said that just all kinds of things. And no, they've never done that at all. They've never spoken to a single contradiction or criticism that we made of them. They, we haven't even got into criticism. One, AAPRP classifies itself as an organization of intelligentsia. Yet they didn't refuse to put out a newspaper. They wouldn't have a Congress. They wouldn't put anything down that held them accountable to masses of people or even to their own membership. And when it came to a constitution that they refused to have, I don't know if they have one now or not, but they refused to, and they said something about their leadership through memo. So no, they have never, ever responded to anything that we put forward, any criticism that was made of them. That was Comrade Jamal.
Jamal, yes. Uhuru. Thank you, Comrade Jamal. Another question from last week came from Comrade Kemu. This is more of a comment, but I thought we could speak to it. Do we understand that if people could see leaders like Chairman and Minister Farrakhan just embrace what that would do for the people and what it would do in the mind of the oppressor? This is good propaganda opportunity, if only that it may be worth it.
Yeah, I think Kemu is on to something. On the one hand, because the struggle is for national liberation. So the whole nation of African people lifted when there is a presumption of unity between the different forces in the nation. And that's why we've created certain kinds of organizations that cross class lines and things like that, because the whole nation has to be liberated. The question becomes under whose leadership, what social force is going to be the dominating leading force. So it could be under certain circumstances helpful to see exactly what Kemu was talking about, that kind of obvious relationship. And we've done things like that in the past. It really has at different times serves to raise the morale of the people, but it can also be misleading at certain times. Like one of the iconic photos that we see of King and Malcolm shaking hands. That photo is being used by opportunists mostly to make an assumption that there were no real differences. There were no political differences, ideological differences between King and Malcolm, and that's absolutely untrue. So that's an instance of a certain kind of demonstration of what appears to be unity to be used against the revolution. And we've seen other examples of that. We had a real big problem one time. We were in Libya. And this is after Nelson Mandela had been freed. And there were a lot of other organizations that were in Libya at the same time. And the Libyan government wanted all of the Africans who had come from the United States to be there to take a picture that had been made of Nelson Mandela and Muammar Gaddafi shaking hands or embracing or something to that effect, or together, and to have an African Liberation Day demonstration where we would pass out that photo. We refused to do that. And they were very, very upset, not because we don't believe in unity, because it was misleading. At the same time this was happening, the ANC, under Nelson Mandela, and still today they have all kinds of political prisoners from the apartheid regime locked up because they refuse to apologize for fighting for freedom with this so-called truth and reconciliation process, where the killers of our people apologize, and then those who fought the killers also had to apologize to bring about some kind of reconciliation. So Mandela worked against the revolution. There was no way we were going to give that kind of illusion that he was on the side of the revolution. So I agree with Kemu and his assumption that there's a certain demonstration of unity between different sectors of our movement that can actually raise the morale of the overall population. And we are open to that. We think we should do that. And we have created organizations with that in mind, that's brought not just for photo ops, but brought different political tendencies and class forces together to push the struggle for national liberation forward. But if that demonstration works to retard the ability of the people to see Africans, to see the way toward actual liberation, then it misleads us. I mean, we've done things with everybody from Jesse Jackson to Angela Davis and in the past. And in every instance, it was something that we used to forward. And with Carmichael, of course, Stokely, over and over again. So whenever you can, I think that's a good thing to do to win the nation to liberation. But the fact is that it has to be to liberation and not something that retards the struggle for liberation. So Kemu, yeah, I agree with the principle that you just put forward, Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you. And thank you, Kemu, for your question or comment. So I think that takes all of the ones from last week. Oh, well, we have one more from Matamela, but I'll look at some of the ones that are coming in today. And then if we have time, we'll go back to him. We have Comrade Inyindu out in Fort Myers, who asked, what is the present status of the AAPRP?
I can't answer that question. I hear of them now and then. I know that there were in the past several splits in the AAPRP. There was one that led, one iteration that characterized itself as the AAPRP GC, I think it was, or G, that's for Guinea Conakry, where Kwame died. And there's been discussion of creating some kind of library surrounding him. And so I don't know. We do see some evidence of existence from time to time, but I can't say beyond that, Comrade Inyindu.
Uhuru, thank you, Inyindu. And Chairman, we're going to go ahead and press it forward. We have a question from Comrade Maito, who asked, Uhuru, Chairman, considering that you were on the original steering committee for African Liberation Day and also offered a seat on the AAPRP Central Committee in 1972, is it safe to assume that you were once an official or unofficial member of AAPRP?
First of all, the AAPRP, this ALD happened before the AAPRP had formally been created. And people who were associated with the AAPRP attended some of the critical meetings to build the African Liberation Day Coordinating Committee and indicated that Kwame or Stokely was opposed to the African Liberation Day. And that this African Liberation Day mobilization was organized around offering support for forces who were fighting against colonial domination in Portuguese colonized countries, in Southern Africa in particular, and said that they came with a position from this. In fact, it was I think may have been Cleve Sellers who brought this forward with the position that the independent governments were opposed to that somehow this threatened the independent government. So they didn't participate. That's the first thing. So there's no relationship between my being a part of the initial organization to build African Liberation Day and what happened with that meeting in North Carolina, where I was given an assignment to be a part of the AAPRP Central Committee. And what else did Maito ask related to that? Was there what? No, I've never been officially, unofficially a part of the AAPRP, never. And I say this, it's really interesting because I made a statement when they were having this meeting. There were a lot of forces who were around there, some of whom achieved a certain element of significance, nominal significance in the movement. And all have been invited to this meeting, and apparently in the same way we have been invited to this meeting. And we're in this meeting, and Kwame is holding court at one big table with mostly men, and then there's another table that was Comrade Miriam Makeba, his wife at the time, was seated, and a lot of the sisters were surrounding her there. And so when they came around and giving assignments, and I said, I can't do that. I don't even know, people in this room, and I haven't been given permission, like from the organization that sent me here to do anything like that. So, that was rather upsetting to some of them. And we laughed about it sometime because they then in this meeting, they sat me at a table in a sort of a corner by myself while everybody else was eating. We called it the Last Supper. We used to jokingly refer to it as the Last Supper. But I didn't join. And there was some allusion to why, in what I've already discussed in terms of our interactions leading up to that meeting in North Carolina that helped to explain why it was impossible to do that.
Aaprp, Chairman. And again, that question came from Comrade Maito. So thank you, Maito, for your question. And we're going to move to Comrade Chimurenga, who is the National Director of Organization for the party in the US. And he asked, Aaprp, Chairman, you identified one of the contradictions with AAPRP as the absence of a revolutionary line. How would you describe the line that they did have?
The AAPRP was based on careerism. Like they had a career of being AAPRP and being in the AAPRP, because they said that's all they were about, was building AAPRP. That they couldn't engage in any kind of struggle. The line was non-confrontation, no struggle against the conditions. Almost everything that one talked about doing was characterized as reformist and characterized as something that couldn't or shouldn't be done, because the real struggle, as they characterized it, was against imperialism. So you couldn't fight for political prisoners' liberation. You couldn't fight around issues impacting on tenants or police murders or anything like that, because they said the real struggle was against imperialism. But what that did was a really opportunist way, and that liquidated the fact that imperialism is not just a concept, it articulates itself in the real world. Imperialism makes itself manifest through colonial domination of our people that results in premature birth, that results in early death, that results in no jobs, that results in the theft of all of our resources, police killing, random acts of violence, humiliation, all of that stuff. That is imperialism. So if you move beyond some idealistic assumption of imperialism that separates it from the actual reality of the people, then you can be satisfied. But Comrade Chimurenga, so if you talk about the line they had was opportunist, it was an opportunist, left opportunism. It was an organization of careers, because the only thing they were about is not fighting against the conditions, but being in the AAPRP, building the AAPRP. That's all they did. And my career is the AAPRP, etc. So I hope that's satisfactory, Comrade Chimurenga.
Aaprp, Chairman, and thank you, Chimurenga, for your question. So we've got one more question left, and I think that might be all we can take really before the end of, before we get to the end of the study. And this is going back to Comrade Matsamela's question, one of his questions from last week. He asked, Aaprp, Chairman, you mentioned the late Jitu Weusi, Big Black from Brooklyn. People in San Diego had a good relationship with him back then. Did the party do much work with him?
Yeah, we worked with Comrade Jitu. It was contradictory, and because in part, as you know, Jitu Weusi at one time became the leading force under Reverend Daughtry of the National Black United Front that was headquartered nationally in New York at the time. And so there were some tensions in the relationship at different times, because it was not a party, it was a united front. And some people in that front, through the Burning Spear, became really influenced by the party. And some of them joined the African People's Socialist Party, and that was to his dismay. And when we were building the first tribunal on reparations for African people in the United States in 1982, We did a lot of work in New York, because that's where it was held in Brooklyn, the first tribunal. And discussing this with G2, he made conditional their support that Reverend Daughtry be the leading force, or play the leading role, that he be promoted as the main force. And we could not accept that. I mean, Daughtry and they hadn't played any role at all, even though we opened it up and somebody from the Black United Front was able to present at that. And so as a consequence, a sort of a boycott was initiated to the extent that they were able to do that through the National Black United Front based there in New York. So we knew, we worked with G2 Weusi, and that's effectively what can be said about it. But that, when I say even about the boycott, I could go more. I mean, there were other organizations, et cetera. The main thing is recognizing that there's inside the struggle for national liberation, the class struggle is raging. And so the thing about revolution is being able to promote the struggle for national liberation, which presupposes the majority of the various forces in the African nation coming together to make that happen. But then the problem that always is outstanding is what class force is going to lead that. And the only class force that had its own organization that was capable of leading that had come up with the idea, that had built the coalition, built the whole reparations movement, the tribunal, and all that, and had tried to pull all these other forces together, the African People's Socialist Party. It was part of the whole process of our becoming what we continue to be. And it was a part of the struggles that helped to mold and give definition to the African Revolution. And so, like I said, there are all kinds of class forces, and some of the people who are iconic, and people know them now, were opposed to it, fought against it as it was happening, precisely because of the class question, because we've never made any pretext. We are representative of the African working class, period. That's the way that is. And the African working class suffers the brunt of the colonial domination of our people. And the African working class is the only social force within the African nation with nothing at all to lose and everything to gain. And so we built policies and things like that, recognizing that reality, and it has led to some discomfort with some of the other social forces or some of the other organizations we work, but we still work with them in a way. We work with people who came and said that, who brought, all kinds of explanation why they had to be opposed to the tribunal. And then almost, we went for 7 years after founding this organization. And then the 7 years, 1979, 1989, when Reagan decided that he was going to give reparations to a pittance to Japanese, then all of these forces who fought us tooth and nail decided that they were going to build a reparations organization, and it invited us to participate. I mean, so class struggle happens within the struggle for national liberation. We recognize it, we accept it, we understand it, and we are determined to provide the leadership for the African working class to be victorious in the struggle for national liberation. Uhuru.
Guru, Chairman, thank you so much for this incredible study. And that was all for the questions for today. And I just want to appreciate all of those who did pose questions. And this, just going through this pamphlet has been really profound. And I'm going to turn it over to you to just give closing remarks. But I did want to acknowledge one comment that came from Carmen Yabinga, who said, "Uhuru and salute to the party that has always been engaged in principled struggle, keeping at the center the objective of winning freedom for our people rather than just making Africans feel good or win arguments. So thank you, Comrade Benga, for your comment. And Chairman, we're at the end. Again, just want to salute you, the struggle that has occurred, and going through this study to deepen our understanding of those who are being introduced to political life and being introduced to how to struggle, how to be engaged in criticism and self-criticism. And so I want to just turn it over to you for closing remarks before we wrap the study up today.
Thank you, Comrade Director Akile. And I think you are really an example of the ongoing growth and development of the party. We've talked about things that's been going back for many, many years. And I think that you represent a profound accomplishment of our party. I also wanted to just express for me and Comrade Deputy Chair Onazene Yeshitela, our appreciation for all of the outpouring, condolences and things like that, which have been offered to Comrade Deputy Chair Onazene Yeshitela, who lost her son 2 days ago to COVID. And it was her only child, her only son, and my stepson, and he passed away. And you've been so generous, all of you, who have offered your support, and we really appreciate that. And it continues to remind us of the significance of the people, and that even as we were with him in his last few minutes, and he passed, and then minutes later, there was an alarm because it was a code blue. Somebody else was dying from COVID and the coronavirus. And the thing is that hopefully everybody takes this assault on our lives seriously. I place it also at the foot of the colonial domination of African people, of colonial capitalism. Even the suspicion that people have, the just suspicion that people have of the suggested support through vaccinations and things like that. And this is not an anti-vaccination statement, it's an anti-imperialist, it's an anti-colonialism statement, because the thing is that people are suspicious because there is no colonialism, and capitalism doesn't normally give anything to the people, and the people are distrustful of it because we live in a country where everything is for sale, including what they characterize as healthcare. There is no healthcare system, and it's almost all the time everyone for himself. And we live under the vicious colonial domination of our people that's just brutalized, humiliated, done all kinds of horrible things to us. And the only thing that can help us to have any kind of confidence in the efficacy, if at all, in some kind of vaccinations or vaccine, is the fact that we know the capitalists are trying to protect themselves as well. It's a global phenomenon that we're looking at, and the US is in a contest with all kinds of countries around the world and trying to prove its efficacy, and it's the most efficient system, and also it wants to protect itself from the system, from the colonial virus. So that's why I say we can lay this thing at the feet of the colonial capitalist system. We will build another kind of social system where healthcare will become a part of the system because people have to live, and people in power will make sure we do everything we can to live. So I want to appreciate again everybody who sent your regards, your condolences, and well wishes to Comrade Deputy Chair Onazene Yeshitela with the loss of her son and my grandson. Thank you, Comrade Director Akile. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you as well. And just want to, again, extend, my condolences and, condolences on behalf of, everybody, in the party and the Uhuru movement who just raised you, Chairman and Deputy Chair, up during this time. And we just want to say long live Brother Octavius as well. Uhuru, thank you again, Chairman, for this really incredible study. And to all of you for tuning in with us today. Again, make sure to like and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV channel on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study, and continue to support the OTM show by donating at paypal.me/Omali Taught Me. So Uhuru, comrade,